Hey everyone, it's Lindsay with High Altitude Astrology bringing you another chart reading. And today I'm going to be looking at the chart of Jennifer Aniston. And she was born on February 11th, 1969 in Los Angeles, California. And she has a birth time of 10:22 p.m. And the reason I'm looking at her chart is because she's going through some relationship changes. It was announced that she and her husband, who have been married since August of 2015, are separating. And I wanted to find out why, at least look and see what the chart has to say about it. So she is an Aquarius Sun at 23 degrees. She has a Sagittarius Moon at 23 degrees. And she has a Libra rising at 24 degrees. So to talk a little bit about her natal chart, you can definitely see her Libran rising, I think. She's very congenial, she's very friendly, when she's interviewed or that kind of thing, she's got that Libran harmony and balance quality going on within her, very pleasant. So I think that fits her rising sign. Her Aquarius Sun is interesting. Aquariuses are different, they're unique, they're individuals, they value freedom and independence. She certainly has been an independent person in her life, if you think about it. She has had a previous marriage to Brad Pitt for a length of time, but really she's been somebody who's kind of carved her own path in her life, especially through her career. And of course that Sag moon at 23 degrees, I also see that when you see her in interviews. She definitely has a sense of humor about herself and, is jokey and likes to laugh a bit and stuff like that. So that's her Sag moon for sure. It also could be somewhat of a philosophical bent that she has towards life and shares that through her emotional, nurturing, feminine principle of the moon. Another couple of interesting things about her chart: she has Venus at 9 degrees Aries in the 6th house of work. And she has Uranus opposing her Venus. So her Uranus is at 3 degrees Libra. And sometimes when you see people with Venus-Uranus connections, it means that there's a challenge, especially with the opposition, to kind of integrate the principle of the feminine loving nature, which is Venus, with the freedom-seeking principle of Uranus. And often there can kind of be these sort of changes in the loving energy or events in one's loving life that are Uranian in nature. So they kind of come as a shock, and they shift things and they change things. And let me just read a little bit about what Sue Thompkins has to say about people that have Venus and Uranus in their chart together, because she might have some insight for us. She gives a few keywords: unconventional relationship, free love, the valuing of freedom, honesty and feelings, unusual appearance, and magnetic attraction. Sue goes on to say, usually the major task facing the individual with the Venus-Uranus combination strong in their charts is concerned with integrating the need for love and relationship on one hand with a need for space, liberty, and independence on the other, as I said. Whatever the actual aspect, people with these contacts often radiate lots of sparkle and personal magnetism. People gravitate to Venus-Uranus like moths to a light, for they often have a very electric quality. So that's her Venus-Uranus opposition in her chart. And she has Saturn in Aries at 21 degrees, right on the cusp of her 7th house, which is at 24 degrees of Aries. And it's interesting with Saturn, Saturn 7th house people, or Saturn descendant people, Saturn 7th house cusp people, there's often like a seriousness about their relationship nature. They look for people who perhaps exude somewhat of a responsible nature, a father figure type of nature, but also sometimes someone where they have to learn the lesson of valuing themselves in relationship, because Saturn is about lessons. And Saturn in Aries is about self-assertion. You know, it's the first sign of the zodiac. It's spring bursting forth. So sometimes there are lessons with Saturn in Aries alone around learning to be self-assertive. But then to have it in on the cusp of the 7th house, which is a house of relationships, that means that that's the area of life that this Saturn in Aries will play itself out in. And so it can mean learning how to really, through lessons, through experience, learning how to kind of stand up for yourself and take care of yourself in relationships and not sacrifice yourself and not, you know, stick with people who don't really truly kind of support who you are, because you fear that you can't do it on your own, or that you know, or that you maybe can't have a loving, nurturing relationship. So you kind of settle for something less than. And I've seen people with 7th house relationships, like Saturn in the 7th house relationships like that, where they're just sort of resigned to their relationship kind of being you know, and it's sad to me to see that. But, you know, everybody has their own life path to follow and live and learn from, or not. But that is definitely a possibility with people in the 7th house cusp. It's to kind of like not take on that lesson of really needing to learn to have strength in your relationships. All right, so let's move on to the transits, because there are some things happening in the chart. We've got transiting Pluto squaring that Saturn in Aries on the 7th house cusp. And by the way, also Saturn in her chart rules her 4th house of home, and also her ability to nurture, but also where she's come from, you know, what she's learned as far as nurturing goes from where she's come from. And it also rules the deepest part of who she is. So it's interesting that the Saturn on the 7th house cusp also rules that 4th house, because it's suggesting that maybe there were, whatever she feels in relationship to this Saturn on the 7th house may come from the home, may come from, I know her parents got divorced at a young age. This began of mid-February of this year, just as the news of her separation was coming about, and it ends in December of 2019. So it's going to be going on for some time, but you know, to have Pluto, the planet of death and transformation and deep change, squaring the Saturn, the principles of and the foundation that we build our life upon, which is on that 7th house cusp of relationships, really just means that this is an intense time of learning lessons and doing well by being open to letting go and being open to the process of deep transformation. It's not always pretty, but it ultimately is taking us to a better place for ourselves. And if we can just kind of stay open to the process, even though it really could be difficult. Pluto is not easy. I often think of writing a book or something called Pluto Isn't Pretty, because it continually brings up what's in our unconscious that we need to look at in order for us to ultimately heal. And that process can be painful. You know, it can be, you know, just filled with challenging experiences. But ultimately, if we can, you know, stay open to the lessons and to what we're being shown, you know, we can learn and grow and regenerate, and it's like the phoenix rising. You know, that's what Pluto does. We rise up from the ashes, sort of brand new in many ways. Also, transiting Uranus has been on that Saturn. So this happened when she got married, actually, because it started in June of 2015, and it now will be ending, and it ended in February of 2017. So this actually already happened last year, well, from 2015, and completed last year. But it's indicative with Uranus on the Saturn, that also is on the cusp of her 7th house. It means that, you know, there was something perhaps impulsive about the marriage, something that sort of had the combination of Uranus, which is like shocking and exciting, but and then Saturn is like, more like heavy and binding and kind of like something more serious, So the energy in the relationship at that time and at the time of that decision had both of those qualities to it. So sometimes Uranus just isn't stable enough of an energy to keep things together. And to make a decision like that when you're under a Uranus transit like that just means that it takes on the nature, the relationship takes on the nature, or the marriage takes on the nature of that energy. So it wasn't necessarily something that was going to perhaps last, forever. And I want to read Robert Hand's description of what Uranus conjuncting Saturn is all about, because he has a nice writing about it. He says, ultimately, no matter how disruptive this transit seems, it is a force for good because it clears away those built-up structures that had been holding you back. You must be willing to let go of those aspects of your life that Uranus has disrupted and not suppress this energy for change. Suppressing it can lead to tension-related diseases, etc. So that was the energy that they made the decision to get married under. Moving on, transiting Saturn has also been squaring her Jupiter, and her Jupiter rules her third house. Her Jupiter is at 5 degrees of Libra in the 12th house, and it rules her third house of communication and thinking. So again, Saturn really takes us to our truth. It does, through sometimes difficult and challenging processes of paring things down. But it does ultimately get us there. Its purpose is to align us more deeply with our truth. And so with a square to Jupiter, Jupiter's about expansion and our philosophies and our perceptions and how we expand out into the world. And with Saturn squaring it, and this is Saturn out of the third house of communication and thinking, squaring that Jupiter, it's just perhaps, that Jupiter in Libra, sometimes Jupiter in Libra can be a little too nice, a little too indecisive. Like they want everybody to feel good, and they may sometimes compromise in order to create that in a way. And so perhaps with the Saturn squaring her Jupiter, her perception, how she expands out into the world, it was kind of saying, okay, time to really pare down that process of expansion and perception, new perceptions, and really kind of get more honest and real about what it is that you really feel or that you really want. And especially because that Jupiter rules the third house of communication, it then would affect her thinking and her ideas and her communication. So another transit happening, another Saturn transit happening as well. Now, something for her to look forward to is that Jupiter is going to be conjuncting her Mars coming up in late February through October of this year. And it's going to go stationary retrograde, Jupiter, on her Mars. And that's going to happen in March. So Mars is our assertive nature. Mars is our strength and our courage. And hers is in the sign of Scorpio. So she really does have a lot of strength and courage and the ability to really kind of, through her actions, penetrate to the core of things and help facilitate the process of transformation in her life. So really with Jupiter coming along to conjunct this Mars, she's going to probably be able to integrate this whole experience a little bit more and really shed the skin of the experience and perhaps, really feel confident moving forward. And, that's also an energy of like a pioneer, like Jupiter on Mars. It's like you really want to expand your horizons and take action at the same time. So just really kind of an exciting time in her life because Jupiter hasn't been here in 12 years. So it will be kind of a new energy for her, and hopefully it will kind of uplift her and move her forward as she moves along through this process. And finally, just a couple of other things to note. Mars, and remember, Mars has been in the sign of Scorpio. That's the sign of transformation. As it's been moving through Scorpio, it's been empowering a lot of us really to feel that energy of transformation and to be able to express it confidently with the Mars energy. And right now, Mars has been sextiling that Jupiter, which had been squared by Saturn, or is squared by Saturn through this year. And Mars has also been sextiling her Uranus, which sits next to her Jupiter at 3 degrees of Libra. And also Mars has been trining her Venus in Aries at 9 degrees. So, to have Mars sextiling a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, that's again just another possibility that, Mars has been stimulating that ability for her to see things in a new way and to really kind of like take action, because Uranus is like time for a change, and Jupiter wants to expand. And the Mars in Scorpio, sign of transformation, has been stimulating by sextile this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in her natal chart. And also it's been trining that Venus, Mars trine Venus. I mean, that's really kind of an energy of like feeling creatively expressive and potentially connecting with a new love. I mean, with the Mars trine Venus, although that's kind of a common energy every couple of years, but it's happening, actually less than a couple of years, but it's happening in her chart right now. And then of course there's inklings of like, ooh, is she gonna get back together with Brad? So that's interesting that the Mars is trining the Venus at this time with all of that gossip. And just a couple of other things to mention. She had this new moon eclipse at 27 degrees Aquarius back in February, right near her sun at 23 degrees Aquarius. And if you think about it, so the new moon eclipse is when the sun and the moon are together. And what's happening is that the moon is basically eclipsing the light of the sun. So a lot of times with new moon solar eclipses, what happens is the energy of the solar principle is kind of covered. So it means that there's like a clearing, or there's a washing away, or there's a resetting of the energy in relationship to shining our light in this Aquarian type of way. And so to have it near her sun, I mean, it just could obviously indicate that this was the time that she was finally perhaps feeling ready to make this change. And sometimes with the Aquarius Sun, if we're looking at what the eclipse might have meant about that, it could mean maybe that it was taking away feelings of wanting to be so inclusive that you can't do what you need for yourself per se, more of the Leonian principle. And her sun is in her 4th house of the deepest part of herself. So, maybe she was able to get more in touch with how she truly felt, and decided that it was time to make a change for herself. And finally, I want to mention a couple of things. She's had a progression and a solar arc happening. The progression is progressed Mercury opposite her Jupiter. And it's progressed Mercury in the sign of Aries, and it's opposite her Jupiter in Libra. So progressed Mercury in Aries, that's like really taking your thinking process and asserting yourself through it. And opposite Jupiter in Libra, again, we were talking about that earlier. It's like Jupiter is about expansion, Libra is about wanting to create harmony and balance, but it's really also about fairness too. What's fair? What's just? So perhaps with this Mercury progression opposite her Jupiter, it's helping her assert herself through her communication better in a way that creates more harmony and balance as she tries to expand her world. And the last thing is that she's had a solar arc Venus, which has been at 28 degrees Taurus, opposite her Neptune at 28 degrees Scorpio. And this could be indicative of this shift in her relationships. Solar arc Venus in the sign of Taurus. Solar arc Venus, you know, in Taurus, Venus is happy in Taurus. It's comfortable, you know, it feels pleasure and enjoyment and everything through the Venusian principle of love and seeking pleasure. But opposite Neptune and Scorpio, and that's really about transformation through the experience of whether it's, you know, transcendence or whether it's through compassion. So perhaps this has been a bit of a struggle, but maybe helping her right now to let go, because the Taurus wants to really hold on, especially the Venus and Taurus loving nature, but the Neptune and Scorpio is kind of like, you know, for everybody's best interest, and perhaps the letting go process is the best way here. And can we look at this from a spiritual perspective that allows the transformation process to happen? So this has been my reading of Jennifer Aniston's chart. Please subscribe if you like this channel, and I also do offer readings. You can reach me at info@highaltitudeastrology.com. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time. Adios.